Oh, hello. Welcome to Tales of the Alleghenies. I'm your host, Richard Sturtz. Tales of the Alleghenies will take you over the threshold of time, evoking your imagination. Come on, let's get started. Episode 1, Unexpected Visitors, will take you back to the year 1859 and through the Civil War years. We're standing at the Flight 93 Memorial Site, overlooking the picturesque farm of Bill Lambert, where our story will begin. I'd like to thank Bill Lambert, the owner of this farm, for allowing me to film here today. He's a sixth generation owner of this farm since 1789. And in the summer of 1971, I came here to see his grandfather, Norman Lambert. And we sat in this very same bench. He was 84 years old at the time, and he was born in this house in 1889 that his father Hugh built shortly after the Civil War. It's a very picturesque farm with all the many outbuildings that they raise various livestock in. And it overlooks the Flight 93 Memorial on Skyline Drive. Norman was a short, thin man and went around the farm always dressed in bib overalls. As the smoke from his pipe curled skyward, his sharp mind would relate countless stories of his pioneer family and events in history. One of the stories that was told to Norman by his grandfather, Moses Lambert, happened on the adjoining farm where Moses lived. No original buildings of the Moses farm exist today, but they were located along Buckstown Road over 150 yards southeast of the entrance to Skyline Road. The year was 1859, and fall began to make its appearance in Stony Creek Township. As colored leaves danced in the crisp autumn air, most of the farm crops had been harvested, except for a field of corn shocks that appeared as teepees silhouetted in the eastern sky in the early morning light. Moses and his two oldest boys, Hugh, age 15, and William, age 10, were out in the barn during the milking and feeding the other livestock. Elizabeth, Moses' wife, was up early too, stoking the cook stove to prepare a hearty breakfast for the family. She was assisted by her daughters, Mary and Harriet, to manage the household chores and attend the needs of Maria, age 8, and Ewald, age 2. In anticipation of the outdoors, the freshly milked cows would step side to side and back and forth as Moses untied them from their stalls. The sun was just breaking over the Allegheny Mountains as Moses walked the cows to the pasture. Suddenly, the cows stopped dead in their tracks as something caught their attention. Down by the sliding bars that opened into the pasture stood two black men. Moses expected they were runaway slaves, so he moved cautiously down to them. The visitors, too, were cautious and stood uneasy as Moses approached. How could they be sure that they wouldn't be turned over to slave catchers this close to the Maryland border? The two barefooted men stood in the frosted pasture grass as Moses asked them, if they would like to have breakfast. I'm sure the two slaves were the talk of the Lambert children because they never saw a black man before. In conversation, Moses learned that they had spent the night in the Scalp schoolhouse that was built 5 years prior in 1854. The school was located along Sunset Road. It seems that the two black men were able to tell directions by celestial navigation because from the Scalp School to Moses Lambert house is due north. The runaways said they were heading to Canada and were trying to get help from the Underground Railroad. Moses, however, knew nothing about the Underground Railroad. After breakfast, Moses took the travelers down to the Ridge Road and told them to stay on the road heading north to Johnstown, where they may get help from the Underground Railroad. I can see why John Lambert chose this place as his early settlement. It's a wonderful view on top of this ridge. You can see the mountains 360 nearly all the way around you. And in the back corner of this field is where Moses met the two runaway slaves that early frosty morning. And he brought them back to where you see the white bales of hay, was where the house stood, and they had breakfast. After leaving the Lambert farm, Moses took the two runaway slaves down to the corner of the field where the old Ridge Road begins, and they departed their ways. This is the old Ridge Road that Moses Lambert put the two slaves on to make their way to Johnstown in hopes that they could find help from the Underground Railroad. The road now is a private farm lane that leads down to the Hugh Lambert farm that Bill Lambert now owns. But I can imagine what the Lambert family thought after they left, saying goodbye and wondering if the two black men made their way to Canada and freedom. I'm sure it lingered in their minds for a long time. This is the land where life began and ended for the Lambert family. John Lambert in 1789 settled here, bought several hundred acres of land, and is now buried here with other generations of his family. It's a beautiful family cemetery with the wrought iron fence around it. And it remains well maintained by the family, Bill Lambert. This is the grave of John Lambert, the original settler here. And his wife, Mary. And the man who met the two slaves early on that morning was Moses Lambert and his wife, Elizabeth. Beside him is his son, Hugh Lambert, who fought with the 52nd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. On September 26, 1864, Hugh Lambert was mustered into the American Civil War with Company C, 52nd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. The 52nd had the distinct honor of raising their flag over Fort Sumter. Private Lambert would be with the rest of his comrades on Morris Island, cheering as a select boat crew of 52nd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantrymen rode to Fort Sumter on February 18, 1865, and raised their flag over the battered fort for the first time in nearly 4 years of American bloodshed. What a jubilation that must have been for Private Lambert and the rest of his men. Private Lambert would carry this rifle, a Springfield, and march with General Sherman's army into North Carolina for the surrender of Confederate General Joe Johnston's Army of the Tennessee on April 26, 1865. Elijah Hunt Rhodes would write in his diary, "Johnston has at last surrendered and all our batteries are firing salutes. This is good news, and the war is certainly over." The roads were full of Negroes, laughing and grinning. Of course, we told them that they were free, but their masters would not believe it. Private Hugh Lambert would see life in the South firsthand and witness the violent and tragic fall of the Old South. During this time, I wonder if the faces of the 2 runaway slaves in the fall of 1859 ever entered his mind. Thank you for joining me in this first episode of Tales of the Alleghenies.